Joel, it is February. We have got spring training taking place this month, which means we got baseball games starting next month. And I can't think of a better time to have you on the Books for Guys podcast, as not only are you the first person associated with Major League Baseball, you're the first person to be associated with baseball, period, on the Books for Guys podcast. So man, it's an honor, and I'm super excited to have this conversation with you today.
Well, the honor's mine, and super cool to be the first. Always good to be a first, I guess, and hopefully more to come on that. I mean, I always like to say that everything I do is related to baseball, but it's not specifically baseball, and then hopefully that shows up in the books and the speaking and even the broadcast style. But I love what you're doing, and excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, man, a lot of people don't, or if people don't know who you are, Joel, you're an Emmy-winning broadcaster. You've been with the Kansas City Royals for, man, I mean, what,
Forever.
17? What season will this be for you?
19 coming up.
19. Okay, because you started in 2008 with
Eight,
them.
yeah.
Okay, and then worked with the Cardinals, I think, before them. Worked a lot of different events. No, I mean, Joel, I've got both your books here, the Small Ball, Big Dreams, and then Small Ball, Big Results. And I'm actually reading both of them at the same time. I
Hmm.
have one on the treadmill upstairs, one on my desk downstairs. So in the mornings when I'm drinking coffee, I'm reading one of them. And then when I'm on the treadmill, I'm reading the other one. But man, this is so cool because, and I want you to just kind of jump in and share your story because you're doing things that a lot of people traditionally in your role haven't done before. You're speaking professionally, you're working with organizations, you're authoring books, you're working with athletes, interviewing high level people across the league and business leaders across the country now as well. But man, just tell your story because you shared it with me a few weeks ago when we were getting introduced, and I just think again, you're doing things that a lot of people haven't done before. So I would just love for you to share how you got into what you do and then how you decided to build a bigger platform with it.
Yeah, I think the first thing that I would say, Chris, too, and I'll start at the end just for a reference point for people because whoever is consuming this might be thinking about. Hopefully, they're thinking about their situation and where they're at. And so I say it this way: that I hope that my journey is a reminder, whatever you're in, that there's always more and it may not be the way you think of it because I think we're wired to say, okay, what's the next raise? What's the next promotion? What's the next step up? Which could be very linear. I mean, sometimes it's not. Sometimes you got to go backwards. But for the most part, it's I want to get to here and then the next step is here and here. But we don't necessarily think outside the silo. And I certainly never did. So now going back, I always wanted to be on TV from as young an age as I can remember, as early as 7 years old, first grade. I loved to talk about sports. I was always, I'll put it in air quotes, an athlete, meaning that I wasn't a very good one. I liked playing it, but I loved to talk about it. Broke into television out of college, and when I was 22 years old, 1994. At that point, the world was different. So I thought I wanted to be the local sports anchor. Those were a lot of my heroes growing up, and so I went that route and it climbed the ranks. From small markets to a little bit bigger to a little bit bigger. My third job took me to St. Louis, where I worked local news for 6 years. But that's really the first market I was at where I was covering professional sports teams. I covered the Green Bay Packers in my first two jobs in Wisconsin, but we weren't in the same town. It was like an event to be able to go, almost a bonus to be able to go and not cover the outdoor stories or the high school stories, the local stuff, and to go do that. So once I got to St. Louis, I'm covering NFL at the time, NHL, Major League Baseball, not to mention college, high school, and on and on and on. And then after 6 years there, I went into regional sports. That's where I started traveling with teams. And then 3 years later, 2008, I moved to Kansas City to be the pregame show host, the postgame show host, and the in-game reporter. And for the last 18 years, I've done over 99% of every television broadcast we've had. The light bulb went off accidentally back in the winter of '06, '07, so late 2006, when a friend of mine said to me, "What do you do in the off season?" Which a lot of people would ask me. And I never answered that question, which also means that I never answered the question of what happens if this ever falls apart? What else would I do other than chasing the next job? And I told him I was speaking to some small association next week, and he said, "Do you do a lot of that?" And I said, "Not really." And he said, You should start a business." That's where it all began. So now, 7, 8 years later, I've been running the speaking business, which led to a podcast, which you'll be on to, which led to 2 books, which on and on and on and on and on, and I'm still broadcasting as well.
Yeah. Yeah. That's incredible, man. Cause yeah, we don't, again, you see people that are sideline broadcasting post game, pre game, doing the show. It seems like that's all they're doing. But you took that platform and expanded it to, like we said, speaking, podcasts, and you're meeting incredible people. I just got done reading um, about 2 people in particular that like I never knew their stories, but Susan with the Yankees, and then Sarah, who, was it ALS, I think she ended up with, but, like, the people you've gotten to interact with and meet and who have written segments for your book, just talking about how just great of a person you are and the impact and sharing things. It's really cool though to see you give these other people credit for molding you and encouraging you and helping kind of shape just what you've been able to create. And I feel that appreciation from you when you tell these other people's stories, which is just in itself just something that I don't know grabbed me. That where I'm reading your books, I feel your appreciation for them, and I can see why you've been able to do what you've been able to do because of the person that you are, which is just really cool and a testament to you.
I mean, I appreciate that, and that means a lot to hear that too, because I think that it's so easy and understandable to say, "Wow, you've got the coolest job. You get to talk about, in this case, baseball every day." Yes, that's absolutely true, and it is amazing, and it is a dream job. But I still always like to ask the question, "What else? What else is there in terms of purpose, in terms of role?" And it took me a long time to understand that as great as this job is, and as amazing as it is, as people would expect, if you love sports or fill in the blank, if you love theater and you get to work in theater, if you love outdoors, you get to work in outdoors, if you love whatever, fill in the blank. Yes, but I'd still ask the question, what else or what more? Or maybe the better way to ask it is, where's the impact? And I never understood that early on. So when you talk about, those people, Susan Waldman, longtime radio voice of the New York Yankees, was the first woman on sports radio in New York. I mean, it doesn't get any more competitive than that. The first woman in the broadcast booth, someone that dealt with ridiculously high levels of discrimination. Any level to me would be ridiculous, but I mean the death threats, the on and on that she was dealing with, and now she is an institution, and she is inspiration for young women and girls and boys for that matter too. And she's not just the voice of any franchise, which would be enough. She's the voice of the
Yankees.
Yankees. Her story is amazing. And then to take it a step further, and the same thing for my dear friend Sarah Nauser, who was a police officer in her 20s that was diagnosed with ALS, given a 5-year life expectancy. She's, I think, in the year 8 right now and doing really well, and she's changing lives. That gets to the what I talked about before, Chris, that we all do have a deeper purpose. We all have a greater platform. You don't have to be on television for that to be the case, or radio, or whatever it is. But just a reminder that our stories are never set. There's always so much more out there. And to put a bow on it, for me, when I hear you talking about the way you just talked about me, I sit there and think, I get an opportunity amidst how cool this job is to share with you what I get to see and the people I get to meet behind the scenes in the form of a book, in the form of a podcast, in the form of speeches. And oh, by the way, it's not always about the athletes. So I just, the attention that we get from being involved in a sport like Major League Baseball and the platform you get leads to having so much more. And I finally figured out how to be able to share that with other people.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love that because if you wouldn't have taken the chance to do these things, I wouldn't have known about Susan or Sarah. I didn't know either of those people, but until I read your book. And then I was telling my wife about them because I'm blessed. I tell everybody my wife is maybe a bigger sports fan than I am. And so as I was telling her about these 2 ladies, we're big volleyball fans, women's basketball fans, and just again, she's such a big sports fan, but it's like, I want to read that when I'm done reading it, just because I was like, man, you would love this book. I'm meeting with Joel. He's writing about these people that he's been connecting with. And again, if you wouldn't have been encouraged to do what you do and write these books, I would have never known about them. And now I'm able to share a little nugget of their story and pass that along and just kind of, I don't know, it's just interesting how that kind of line of things can happen when you step out and like you said, ask, what else? What else can I do? How else can I have an impact? What can I do to be make a difference? What can I do to be useful? And just maximize yourself and your abilities. And so again, it's just super cool because I'm a big sports fan, and just the opportunity to meet you and know that get to interact with someone who's around professional athletes for a living. That's always been a dream of mine too. I'm like, how can I be around sports, and do this? And so I get to live vicariously through someone I know now when I see you do that. But Joel, I was going to ask you just a couple questions about just, through your journey through this and what that's looked like. But early on, when you decided to get in this, hey, I'm gonna speak, I'm gonna write a book. What did you feel like? Did you feel almost, I don't know. I've interviewed some other people too. We talk about imposter syndrome. You think like, am I the one that should be able to be doing this or leading the charge? Like, what were your challenges when you kind of broke that barrier and started doing things that other people weren't doing?
You know, I'm so glad you asked this question, Chris. And as you started to ask it, my brain immediately went to, I'm going to talk about imposter syndrome. And so we're on the same wavelength here because not 3 seconds after you said that, you dropped those two dreaded words. And while I'm by no means an expert, and I actually wrote a newsletter blog about this recently. I think we all have imposter syndrome. And I know that that doesn't sound crazy, but I bring this up because, first off, people would assume that a professional athlete doesn't have imposter syndrome. How do you know that? People would assume that some big time CEO would not have imposter syndrome. How do you know that? Because the way that our brains are wired, we all have some bit of it. I think that the ones that manage it the best are the ones that are able to recognize it for what it is and what it's not. And I found myself when I started speaking going through the worst levels of it. And when I started to recognize it, I realized that I used to go through the same things in TV. I used to, as we'd watch the competition, as any newsroom would do, and we'd watch, what did Channel 4 do? What did Channel 5 do? And I'd watch their sports reporters and say, I'm not even as good as those guys. Like, almost feeling like you're tricking people. And then eventually you just get to a point where you're like, this is what I do. And maybe there's still that part of your brain that says, maybe I'm tricking people, but they seem to like it. I don't know. So and then as the speaking thing came up, and look, I remember a buddy of mine, I wrote this in the intro to Small Ball, Big Results, when I told him what I wanted to do. And he says, well, you're going to, he claims that I said this. I don't remember it, but I won't deny it. He says that he said to me, well, if you're going to start a speaking business, you need to start networking. And he claims I said, what is networking? Now, I don't remember ever saying that, but I believe it because I've been networking my whole life. We just don't call it that in television. We might be more likely to call it, shooting the you know what with someone. And so that's what you do. You're networking with players and coaches and even fans and front office every single day. And so I started building my business by just going out there locally first in Kansas City and networking and meeting people and learning the art of that, which we never stop learning on that. How can you be a better listener than a talker? How can you add value and help people out? Well, you can't do that if you don't listen and find out what is troubling them and instead of sell, sell, sell. And then I'd get myself on stage and I'm like, do I belong here? Like I didn't even know what the C-suite was or what half of these titles meant, because why would I ever? From 1994 through about 2006, uh, if if there was any connection with any of these people, they knew who I was. I didn't know who they were. They were watching our broadcasts, and suddenly the role was reversed. I wanted to learn about them, and I started understanding that, okay, everybody's got a story to tell. There's a lot to learn here. But then I'd get on stage and say, are they just hiring me because I'm a TV broadcaster? Are they just hiring me because I'm in baseball? And that's great that they are, but do I actually have something to offer? And then it was, but people really seem to like this. people seem surprised by it, that they're not just getting an update, or they're not getting an update on the state of the Kansas City Royals, or, you know, what's this guy like? No, they're actually getting real strategies of how to build better culture and better teams and stronger trust within their organizations. And slowly but surely, you start to erode, chip away at that imposter syndrome and realize, you know what? Maybe this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And so that fight never stops. But I will say that it's very there's a there's a sweet spot, Chris, that when the imposter syndrome goes away, you stop thinking about all of those things and you just go do what you do. And so when people ask me all the time, do you get nervous in front of a television camera? I usually like to respond back, well, do you get nervous going to a meeting at work every day? Of course not. It's what you do. Early on, I used to get nervous on TV. Now, if you were to tell me that in 5 minutes we have an emergency television broadcast, I don't have a lot of information for you, I'd be like, great, let's do it.
That's good.
Hopefully somebody will tell me what's going on. My only fear is uh, I dressed appropriately. Otherwise, let's go. That's such a liberating thing. And what that is you're getting rid of that imposter syndrome, or you recognize it and you say, it's not real. I'm good. And I do my thing. And so it took me a while to get there with the speaking. And if I'm being quite honest, there's still some audiences and days where I battle that just like anybody else.
Yeah. I love everything you said there because it's pretty cool. I've noticed like the more people that I talk to who are accomplishing great things, the better and calmer I get at my own craft because I realize everyone's going through something where they're not
Always.
100% confident in what they're doing. Everyone's trying to figure it out. But as you chip away, small ball, do little things right, day in and day out, you just build on that confidence, you build on that ability, and then that's like you said, that syndrome, imposter syndrome, or that doubt starts to go away, and you're ready to rock and roll no matter the situation. And that's what I like to highlight there. And I'm glad you talked about that progression because again, it's really cool. The more people I talk to and hear that from them, it helps me personally go, everyone's been here. I'm gonna be better tomorrow and better the next week. And I love that you described that progression that you had.
I just want to give you one final thought, because I think that there's an assumption with some people that, well, if he's on TV and he's been on TV for 30 plus years, he couldn't possibly have that. And so I really actually like to share it, not because I feel like it's debilitating to me, because I finally feel like it was liberating to recognize that not only did I have it, but everyone has it. I wrote about it a few weeks ago, and I got two separate messages from my parents, who, by the way, are married, still live together. But I don't remember who said what. It doesn't matter. But I think like my mom said something like, "Well, I know who you got that from. You got that from me." And then my dad said something like, "I been dealing with that my whole life. I didn't think that you dealt with that." And that's my own parents, you know. So it's like we tend to just assume it's us, and it's not. It's everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're right. And again, I love that you share that because I think a lot of people need to continue to it's one of those things you got to continue to hear. It's not one of those things you can just hear once and be like, "Cool, I'm good." It really does make a difference to hear it a lot that people are going through that and you're going through the same thing they are. You're no different when you're working towards something or trying to get somewhere. Joel, curious too. I've got you just talking baseball for a second. So this is something you primarily do a lot more of in the off season, the speaking and writing and all that. During baseball season, what's your schedule look like? How long are you at the ballpark and when travel is involved, just what does that day to day look like for you?
It's not as hectic as you might think. The hectic part, and that's not even the right word, is just the grind of the long season. That when you've done it as long as I've done it, because I didn't have this figured out early on, I've got it fairly well figured out now. You have to come up for air at some point, and baseball does not really allow you to do that, which means that there are some days where I might have still some networking meetings on the calendar if we're home, that if I'm not feeling it, I'm just gonna postpone it, as much as I wanna get it in, that I understand that I have to a little bit of what my mind and my body is telling me. Am I mentally exhausted? Am I physically exhausted? And not that I'm out there playing, but I still like to be able to get to the gym. I still like to be able to work out. There are a lot of late nights. The younger me made those nights even later and had a really good time. The older of me says, you know what, I'd rather wake up at a normal hour today and get a workout in and eat healthy and all those type of things. So that's the biggest challenge, is that the grind oftentimes is, oh, finally, I just finished 15 straight days. Okay, well, now I've got an off day, but it's not even at home, it's on the road. And oh, by the way, after that day off, you're working the next 14 days or 13 days, and it's 28 out of 29. But as far as the days itself, I think what happens, at least for me, is that I know what I need to do to get ready for a game, and I know what I don't need to do, meaning that I think the longer you're in any profession, the more you realize that as much as it'd be nice to know this or do this, I'm not using it. I don't need to do it. So let's push that aside and focus. What do I need to do every single day to get myself ready? And I hear this from a lot of athletes too, that over time, they develop a rhythm and a routine that works specifically for them. And so I know what I need. When I say I could jump in front of a camera in 5 minutes, it's because I know what I need to know to do it. I know how to play hurt, meaning that, for instance, day game after a night game, don't have as much preparation time. I know how to simplify. I know how to do things when I'm not as on as I want to be, or if I'm under the weather and I have a little bit of a cold, or whatever it is. And so the longer you do it, the better. You know, for 7 o'clock now, it seems like we have a lot of 6:30 games or 6:40. For a 6:40 game in Kansas City, I'll usually get to the ballpark around 2:30, maybe a little bit closer to 3. On the road for a similar time game, a little bit later, because the clubhouse is open before batting practice, a little ways before batting practice starts. The home team almost always goes first. So when we're on the road, they open a little bit later. I might get to the ballpark at 3:30 on the road. You do some prep work, you do a lot of reading. The bulk of the work that I do is once I get to the ballpark, because that's where you're talking to people and you're learning stories and you're, again, BSing with them and figuring out what stories you might want to tell.
Yeah. Baseball's always been intriguing to me because I didn't play baseball, I played football, but I was thinking of like game day. You're at the stadium and with the trainers 4 hours before kickoff, and then you got pregame postgame. And yeah, anybody that's there covering the game, they're there at the same time. They're there getting prep in, talking with people, they're staying late. And with MLB, yeah, I mean the season basically players are reporting next week in mid-February and it doesn't end till November. And then really the baseball schedule is weird because then you got holidays and then a very quick break before it all starts again. So it's as I was thinking about your schedule and then you doing, a lot of what you do on top of covering games, right when that season's done. Yeah, I was curious to know just kind of what your break consisted of to where you kinda take a mental, like, reset before you jump into things again 'cause, again, there's a lot of games in baseball, and it covers a
Yeah.
lot of months, and so it is, it's just interesting to know your strategy and how you attack your year with everything you do.
Yeah. And I think, one of the dangers, I guess, for me is that finding the sweet spot, I'm still working on it. I'm getting closer of in season, what's too much for my business or for me, really, and what's not enough. And, I would dive in, dive in, dive in, and then I'd hit the wall. For example, Small Ball, Big Dreams, Small Ball, Big Results, I wrote during the pandemic. So that was able to, enable me to do some things. We only played 60 games that year. I tried to write Small Ball, Big Dreams during the season, and I would find that, okay, I just want to write one chapter every 2 weeks. And a month would go by and I'd written 2 sentences. And then I'm beating myself up. And I just didn't have the mental fortitude to do it, or I was too tired. And so trying to find for me ways to not let 6 months go by. It's never 6, but to let a month go by or even a week go by without being engaged in the business while still understanding that I can't go at the speed that I do in the off season as the season. I'm not going to speak as often in season. I won't miss a game in place of a speech, even if it might be more financially beneficial to me. My commitment, first and foremost, is to this baseball broadcasting job. If I'm being selfish, I want to do it all. And a lot of days I can, but I'm very upfront with clients that, if we can find a date that fits, then let's do it. If not, then I might not be the right fit at this moment for you. And I hope you appreciate that. But then the other thing is, like, I remember we finished up the season last year, of all places, in Sacramento, which is where the the Athletics are temporarily playing for a few years until they move to Vegas. They'd left Oakland, and so we finished in Sacramento on a Sunday. I get home on a Monday, and people are like, "How much time are you gonna take off?" I'm like, "I got meetings today, like, I got people to see." And so I just went hard October and November, in part because, there's a lot of speaking opportunities, there's a lot of networking opportunities, and I knew that come December, things get more quiet for everyone with the holidays, and I also knew that at some point, I'm gonna hit the wall. So we took a month off. My wife and I took a month off. We went to Florida for the month. We rented a house. We lived there. It's not that I did no work, but I probably did like 10 to 15% of the work instead of what I usually would do. And then, January hit and I came shooting out of a cannon and everything was good. But I also need to make sure, Chris, that as good as my pace is or as fast as my pace is right now, that I don't get to opening day on March 27th for the Royals in Atlanta and have no energy. Like my energy's got to be at peak on March 27th, and it will be.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's that when you break it down, that's really got your platform to where it's at was this job in what you do and where people see you and how you can build off that. So you've got to make sure you give it all to your role with the Royals to be able to do what else you want to do, after that. At least for now, at some point, you maybe the next Tony Robbins, and you can just go do whatever. But
That'll be okay too. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I love that. Well, Joe, just a couple more questions for you. And man, we could talk all day. We could talk sports and all kinds of things just because, again, my interest and we talked a little bit about it even before doing this. But do you have, I mean, these books are amazing. I'm halfway through both of them. I'll finish both of them this week. And again, I'm thoroughly enjoying them. Do you have any future plans of continuing to author more work, or will that maybe organically happen? If it does, it does. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
I think the answer is sort of yes to both. I don't have any desire at the moment to do it, but I fully expect that I will. And not only that I will, but that I should. And I think that that should part. I mean, let me go back. When I wrote my first book, I wrote that book in part because people told me that speakers write books and that's how you build your brand. And that's a great, networking tool and it's a great content tool and on and on and on. And so that's why I did it, even though I always knew that I had a book in me just because of all the experiences. When the second one came about, I already knew when the first one ended. I had a business coach that said to me, "I've got the second title for the title of your second book." And I'm like, "Wait, can we wait? Like the ink just dried on this one." And I'm just like, "I don't have it in me." But then after a couple years, I did. So I think right now I'm sort of at that phase of like, I know there's more. I don't have it in me right now, but there's no pressure or deadline other than once I make a decision to do it, I want to get it done. So I think what I would say is that I fully expect to because I'm going to be recharged at a certain point. But I think the more important piece to it is that if when I started all this, I was writing because I had to support my business. I don't think writing a third book is going to suddenly build my speaking business any more than where it has. But I think you hit on something important early in this podcast that I have so much access to so many people, not just the athletes, but the CEOs, some really successful billionaires, some famous, entertainers, and on and on and on. And it's like, I'm just an everyday guy like everybody else that happens to be caught in this really cool web of exposure to really unique people. And most of these people that I meet aren't that different than you and I. Their bank accounts are different and they might do some things that enable them to be at the highest level of success. But if I have the ability to share that with people and that gives people inspiration, sharing stories like Sarah's or like Susan's, or within that same book, if you haven't read it yet, is a really good inspirational story about my mom. And her path was very similar to Susan's, just not in the television world. I think that's a gift that I could provide in helping other people. And so if I had to make a decision right now, are you going to write another book or not? I would think the answer is almost certainly yes. I just don't know when.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's cool. I like that you talk about you basically wrote your first book out of responsibility to grow what you wanted to grow. It wasn't necessarily something you enjoyed. but the second book comes around and you've already done it. Things are growing. It's a little more enjoyable to write that. And I'm sure the third one, it'll be even more. They both have purpose and good things from them, but I can see how with every piece of work you come out with, it's going to be another level up of what you're trying to put out there. And it is really cool that you are around all of these people because you get to take nuggets and lessons from them and see how they got to where they're at. And then now you're putting it in work that someone like Chris or someone else can read and take little nuggets from them too. Sarah and like the resilience and the positivity, and Susan, working through all type of barriers to get to where they want to go. And it's like, I can sit here and complain about struggles I'm doing, and I'm like, geez, like what I'm having to go through is nothing compared to what they are battling or going through. And so, but again, I'm taking those lessons from the stories you're sharing. And so I'm so glad that you wrote these. And I'm sure there's so many more that you're going to be able to share. And you're probably already thinking about them, for your next book, what you'll be able to put out there. But all that for me to say, thank you, Joel, for man, maximizing what you can do and putting this out there, because it is having an impact whether you know it or not. And I'm just one of the ones telling you. I'm sure there are a lot, but man, just keep doing what you're doing, man, because
Yeah.
it's awesome.
Well, I appreciate that, and, and the same as is and should be said about you too. I mean, when I learned about you and what you're doing and how cool of a concept, I mean, we always hear about book clubs and it's usually all women or mostly women, right? And well, why can't guys do that too? And so, you might not see as much of it, but it should be out there. And so you're opening that door for a lot of people. And so I guess that's my point to all of this is you don't need to be on TV. You don't need to be in the spotlight to be able to make an impact, and you're doing that, and so it's super cool, and I know you're doing it because if you're reading, you might be the first person that has said that you're reading both of my books at the same time, but when you're doing the kind of things you're doing, I would imagine you've gotta be reading every single day, which is awesome. I wish I had that kind of discipline.
Yeah. Well, a lot of it happens on the treadmill when I'm forcing myself to get
Yeah,
steps. I almost
yeah,
have to force myself to walk instead of run so I can actually read
yeah,
and,
yeah,
and knock out two things at
I get
once.
that.
No, Joe, this is awesome. And like you said, I think talking with guys like you who are doing things that a lot of young men are interested in. They're interested in sports. They're interested in meeting their heroes and idols. And you're out there doing that and speaking with them, but then you're also doing big things in business. And so it is important for guys like you to put your work out there. And I'm just kind of a middleman to share it and hopefully inspire young guys to pick up your book or follow what you're doing and realize, how important reading is and how important working hard is. And again, just motivating young guys to spark that curiosity, start that personal development growth, be interested in other people, learn from them, take things from them. So, man, Joel, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. Oh, a lot of people are going to love listening and watching this. And now that we've been able to do this, can't wait to follow your career, follow all your work. And man, maybe I'll have the honor of actually hearing you speak in person somewhere at some point. I would really enjoy that. And so, yeah, man, just keep doing it. And thank you again for doing this.
I appreciate it, Chris. Thanks so much for all the kind words and for having me as well.
Absolutely.